Good morning.
This letter brings up a very interesting question. It is a little off the point of what we have been doing the last few days, but it might be well to cover it just the same. And the question is this. We read in Scripture, "I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. If you have seen me, you have seen the Father." And then we have statements like, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" And it would appear that all through Scripture you have divine promises. And then on the other hand, you have some of these same prophets, sages, seers, expressing fear, doubt, discouragement, wonder. Now, to begin with, this statement, supposedly uttered by the Master on the crucifix, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" may have been uttered, may not have been. If you can visualize that scene, here is a man suspended high above the heads of those around him, and already crucified, undoubtedly in a weakened state. It really doesn't seem likely that those down there on the ground actually heard the words that he uttered. It doesn't seem that in that state he could have shouted very loudly, O God, why hast thou forsaken me?" And so there is a very serious doubt that comes into my mind as to whether or not he ever spoke such words, since he knew the nature of his demonstration. If he did, if those were his words, they would represent a momentary fear, a momentary lapse due to the actual fact of the crucifixion. It may well have been that in his mind was some thought of a miraculous deliverance from the experience, and then finding it necessary to go through it, there could have been that momentary sense of fear or doubt. On the other hand, it could also have been a mistranslation of what was uttered. He could very well have said something that sounded like that and later was translated like that. Now, the main point is not whether or not he stated it, but rather the fact that probably every religious leader all through the ages has at times experienced a doubt, a fear, a wonder, a discouragement. Let us go first of all to the scriptural promises in the Bible. I will never leave you nor forsake you. If you go through the waters, I will be with you. The flames will not burn. God in the midst of thee is mighty. Whenever you come in Scripture to a spiritual promise, a divine promise of safety, security, peace, health, wholeness, harmony, remember that you are not listening to a man making a promise or delivering a message. It is the Christ itself, the Spirit of God in man, who voices that. It is the Christ itself, not a man. It's not a man reporting what God said. It is the voice of Christ itself saying, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. It is when an individual is attuned to God, to the Spirit, that these impartations come. You see, that is one of the points that I've been trying to make in the message of the Infinite Way, that just because the Bible has these spiritual promises, don't think that they apply to you or me. They do not apply to human beings. No spiritual promise applies to a human being, or human beings would all be saved. They apply to you and me when we are in our spiritual oneness with God, and then we are no longer human beings. Now does he give us power to become the sons of God. If so be the Spirit of God dwell in you, then are ye children of God. Do you see that? When you make your contact, that is what the whole message of the Infinite Way is about. Teaching us to make our contact. It isn't trying to give us a new religion. It isn't trying to give us a new message from some human being about something. It isn't merely to invent a new way of healing the sick people and feeding the hungry. The whole import of the message of the Infinite Way is through writings, through speech, lessons, lectures, classes, recordings, to lift the individual to a state of spiritual apprehension wherein and whereby they too become the sons of God. Do you see what that point is? When you then have a divine intuition, when you then have an impartation from within, you are not a human being. You are then a child of God. You are consciously one with the Father. Otherwise, you are a man whose breath is in his nostril, and wherein is he to be accounted of? Do you see? Who is going to worry about mortal man? Not even God bothers to save mortal man. God lets them rot away on battlefields or in prison dungeons or wherever they find themselves. It is only the Son of God, the spiritual image and likeness, which is held in the bosom of the Father. And in order to achieve that, you have to make that return journey of the prodigal son. You have to get up from that banquet with the swine, leave behind all of those thoughts and people and doings of that swinish world, and return to the Father, abandoning even mother and father and sister and brother for my name's sake. One has to abandon all their previous conceptions of life, not only their previous conceptions of sin, but their previous conceptions of what constitutes good. In other words, we have wonderful benevolences on the human plane. We have wonderful things being done by doctors, nurses, judges. We have wonderful things being done by human beings on the human plane that has nothing to do with dying daily to those things and being reborn of the Spirit. Now, every divine promise in Scripture is the Christ uttering itself to whoever heard it. And whoever heard it received not only the benefit for himself, but for all those who were in his charge. In other words, when the Hebrew prophets had the Israelites under them, whether it was from Egypt to the Red Sea, whether it were those in the rebuilding of the temples, whether it were those in moving from country to country of the Holy Lands, whoever the divinely inspired leader was, they were given the care of their people, the disciplining of them and the care of them. And because they were still man whose breath is in his nostril, because they were still trying every once in a while to break away and return to Baal, and to mingle with the heathen, they had to be rebuked, they had to be punished, they had to be disciplined, because they were going through the preliminary stages of initiatehood. And all of us, when we are in this stage of initiation, that is, when we are in this stage of passing from humanhood to the realization of our divinity, we are all punished. We are all admonished. We are all given 10 commandments. We are all given Jeremiah's prophecies of disaster if we do not change our ways. We are all told, turn ye and live. God has no pleasure in your dying, which means you're going to die just as sure as fate, unless you turn from these human ways. And so it is. Try to understand that these promises that are in Scripture apply to us not because of our voicing them or repeating them as affirmations. They apply to us in proportion as we make our conscious contact within and receive them as impartations within. Now, all of these other statements, why hast thou forsaken me, and the many others that are in Scripture of doubt and fear and discouragement, those are the statements of you and me while we are on the path of not having fully attained. And so it is that always there are going to be questions in our mind whether we are doing the right thing in accord with God's plan. Our motive we know is right. Our instinct is right. We want to do right. Our desires are right, but we still are not certain, is this God's plan? Should we be doing this which we are doing today? Or, if we were hearing God correctly, would there be something else for us to be doing at this very moment? Always that comes up. And more especially does it come up in the experience of those who are practitioners or teachers or leaders who are responsible for the spiritual unfoldment of those who have entrusted themselves to the teacher or teaching. Because then one is not merely responsible for one's own demonstration, but for those who he has or she has taken to guide along the path. In other words, it would have been an easy thing for Moses to fail or to succeed, since he would have only had his own experience to consider if he alone were involved. But here he had these hordes of Hebrews, these hordes of people who were in slavery, whom he had been directed to lead into freedom. And what happened? Why, right while under his own guidance, over and over they said, oh, why did you do this to us? Why didn't you leave us back there in Egypt? We were slaves, but at least we had food in our stomach and a place to sleep. And you've had a recent experience that will show you that man whose breath is in his nostril will always prefer to be a slave, if someone will just assure him a couple of meals a day and a place to sleep. And it doesn't have to be a good place or good food, just so long as he doesn't have the personal responsibility of going out and earning it or competing for it. He's perfectly willing to sign away his vote to whoever will provide that little meager living. That's human nature. Now, here were these Hebrews pleading to go back into slavery so they could be fed and housed and clothed. And here is a leader, knowing right well he's got a hard path to give them. They may have to go without food, without housing. They may have to go through many, many dangers. But he knows that if they stick by They will be led into their ultimate freedom and slavery, and so he's got to fight the very people whom he's trying to bless. Well, now, the experience of Moses has been repeated by Elijah, by Isaiah, by Jesus, by John, by Paul. All of those people, all of those leaders had to fight the very people they were trying to bless. Why? Because those who they were trying to bless were going to be called upon for sacrifices which they themselves didn't want to make. They wanted their way. And they not only wanted their way, but they wanted it right now. And they were perfectly willing at every stage of history to forego a future good for a present half-good. Well, do you wonder that it must have come to Moses, to Elijah, to Isaiah, to all of the Hebrew prophets, to Jesus, to Paul, to Peter, to John, to wonder if it's worthwhile, to wonder whether or not they really are interpreting God's message correctly, since they seem to be the only ones who have faith in it? Yes, because no one on earth has ever attained the full Christhood until after the crucifixion. There has remained in every religious leader some trace of humanhood. And that expressed itself at some time or other as doubt, fear, discouragement. Well, now, knowing ourselves as we do, we won't be very harsh with them. But we will acknowledge this, that every time we are touched with a doubt, a fear, a hesitation, a sense of discouragement, let us acknowledge that what is operating in our consciousness at that time is a sense of separation from God. It is not a separation from God, because we can no more be separated from God than this ring can be separated from gold. Why? Because gold is this ring. Gold constitutes this ring. And there is no possible way to remove the gold and still have a ring, because there is no gold and a ring. There is a gold ring. So it is with us. We cannot be separated from God. Why? Because there is no we. There is no such thing actually in all the world as you or me. God being infinite, God is all there is. God constitutes you and me. God constitutes our being. God constitutes our life, mind, soul, and being, just as much as gold constitutes this ring. Gold is the substance, ring is the form. God is the substance, we individually are the form as which God appears. There can be no separation between us and God. God is the essence of our being, the life, soul, mind, spirit, the law, the continuity, the activity. God is the all in all of our individual being, whether we be saint or sinner. But the degree of our sainthood is totally dependent upon the degree of our conscious realization of that oneness. The degree of our sinner capacity is the degree of the sense of separation that is set up within us. We can entertain a sense of separation from God. As a matter of fact, that is all there is to humanhood. We are not human beings as we seem to be. We are pure spiritual beings. But that which is called the prodigal's experience, or that which is called the fall of man, the Adam and Eve experience, all of these things do not constitute separate entities. Remember that Adam and Eve before the fall is also Adam and Eve after the fall. It is not that there are two separate beings, a human being and a spiritual being. It is only that a human being is entertaining a sense of separation from God, and the moment that sense of separation begins to disappear, Christhood or divine sonship begins to appear. Is that clear? The whole thing takes place within ourself. Again, we go back to that same thing of let's not think anything about God in this situation. God is. God already is. All of this has nothing to do with God. This has to do with us. Do we or do we not entertain a sense of separation from God? Do we or do we not begin to achieve the realization of our spiritual sonship? The whole thing has to do with us. Now, God plays this part in our demonstration. Were it not for the grace of God, we couldn't even be reaching out toward the realization of divine sonship. In other words, let no one ever take credit for being on the spiritual path, because they didn't bring themselves there. No human being ever has, and no human being ever will. It is the nature of a human being to love the company of swine. It is the nature of a human being to love degradation, separation from good, self-indulgence, and so forth and so on. That is the nature of that which has become separate and apart in sense from God. And so that will never, never seek God. But in the experience of every person, past, present, and future, there comes a certain moment when they are penetrated by a ray of God, when a touch of God breaks through into their consciousness, not because of them, in spite of them. And from the moment that that ray touches us, the end is inevitable. We are going to find our way right to the throne of God. With some of us, the way is a long one and a difficult one because of the many facets of humanhood which we have built up and which we cannot let go of. We do not find it easy to let go of many of the qualities that, if we could let go of, would elevate us into heaven. And I don't mean only let go of all the evil qualities, I mean some of those good ones too, which are positive deterrents to our spiritual progress. Now, in proportion as this ray of light continues to penetrate us, it pushes us, it leads us, it makes us stumble. And because of this, we have periods of gradual growth toward spiritual consciousness. And then all of a sudden, we get a wallop that sets us back about 10 degrees. And we have to pick ourselves and begin all over again. That happens to everybody on this path who, like ourselves, yield reluctantly to the spiritual impulse. There are a few gifted individuals who by previous experience, before this present experience on earth, have been so wonderfully prepared that their way seems to be much easier than ours. They catch a spiritual light and they just progress on upward like Eve mounting up to heaven. Not our ancient friend Eve, our little Eva, climbing the golden stairs. In that purity of consciousness, a childlike consciousness, which many adults have who have brought it over with them from their previous developments, the ascent into spiritual consciousness is a beautiful one, a gradual one, a harmonious one, and beset with very, very few problems, and even those few not of their own making, but having to do mostly with their families, friends, and that which they've picked up on the journey. But for most people, the path is ups and downs, and usually with the realization at the end of a year or two, of every year or two, well, I am a trace ahead of where I was a year or two ago. Now, just to conclude this point, watch now that you do not believe that these divine promises are meant for human beings walking around living a purely human life. These divine promises are meant for you individually in proportion as you make the contact and receive those within your own being. If it flashes into your mind, "Thou art my beloved, in whom I am well pleased," that is a divine promise, and you can bank on that. That's better than a note from the Bank of England. That's really worthwhile when you receive that impartation within you. It will never leave you nor forsake you, and it will always bring you back to the throne of God. Once you hear in your ear, "Fear thou not, for I am with thee," that's all you ever need. That is the absolute assurance, as David's was, in God's grace. You have attained God's grace when you have heard the still small voice within you, whether you've heard it as a voice or felt it as an impulse or just achieved it as an awareness, regardless of how it comes. You have attained God's grace. Then you can say, "Oh, well, He will lead me beside the still waters, even if I have to cross a few rough ones to get there. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures, even if I walk through a few barren ones before I arrive there." But the point is not whether or not we have complete what we think of as happiness or peace today. As a rule, that's just some namby-pamby idea of what constitutes happiness or peace. What counts is whether or not we are preparing ourselves by study, by meditation, by mingling with those on the spiritual path, whether or not we are preparing ourselves for the hearing of that still small voice, for the actual experience of the Christ. Don't you see that once you achieve it, you are absolutely free from churches, from organizations, from government support, and from all of these bonds that the human mind wants to place on itself. We are in bondage to no man, to no organization, to no government, to no form of economy, once we have achieved this contact with our inner being, with our inner selfhood, with our Christhood. We are then free in Christ, and we can then say, "Christ liveth my life." It makes no difference whether we have capitalism or communism. It makes no difference whether we have depression or boom. It makes no difference whether we have floods or no floods. But Christ liveth my life. It leadeth me beside the still waters. It maketh me to lie down in green pastures. The Christ is 1,000 may fall at my left hand and 10,000 at my right hand, still it will not come nigh me. Because I have made that contact. I am dying daily. I am being reborn of the Spirit. I am being guided and directed, fed, maintained, sustained, healed, saved by this inner light, this inner illumination. But you see, the secret is the contact. Now, even after having achieved it, do not be too hurt if once in a while a sense of fear, doubt, or discouragement comes up. Because upon investigation, you will usually find that that hasn't come with anything that has to do with your personal demonstration, except in as much as your personal demonstration is affected by those around you. It will probably be when these fears and doubts and hesitations come, that it will be because of some friend or relative or patient or student or somebody other than yourself. And it is their demonstration that you're more concerned about than your own. Nobody has ever achieved spiritual leadership that had any concern for their own demonstration. No one has ever achieved a spiritual leadership while it made any difference to them whether they ate or didn't eat, or whether they slept in a barn or slept in a house, or whether they stayed up all night or stayed up all day, or whether they did this or that. As long as there was a personal concern or the need for personal demonstration, they could never have achieved spiritual leadership. And so it is that all of those who have attained spiritual leadership and still had concern had it not for their own well-being. They didn't care whether they were crucified, whether they were thrown to the lions, burned at the stake, because they had already visioned through to the life eternal. So their particular fate meant nothing to them. They were flirting with death. Everyone does who becomes a spiritual leader. Flirts with death every minute that they're on the way, and flirts with disgrace. Because the human mind is such that it would love nothing better than to throw headlines in the newspaper: pastor, minister, priest, rabbi, somebody else is in disgrace. That makes for great news. And more especially if they're an unorthodox saint or sage or seer who is fighting entrenched religious teachings. More especially are they glorified on the front pages when they make a mistake, and ridiculed, and where possible imprisoned. So never think for a moment that a person can achieve any sense of spiritual leadership while they care for their own particular fate. And that's not a defiance. That's just a realization that no matter what happens to me in the outer, I and the Father are already one, and do what you want with this body, I and the Father still are one. Now, you yourself find very quickly that your own particular fate is not of too much importance to you. You are not too concerned whether you are eating the best cuts or the least of the cuts. You are not concerned with your personal health or well-being, but rather with those who come in range of your thought or consciousness, or who look to you for guidance. And so it will be, as you study Scripture, please remember that there is no disgrace in coming to those moments of fears or doubts, but get them over with in a hurry and get back on the beam, because inwardly you do know this: I and the Father are one. There is no such thing as gold and a ring. There is only gold formed as a ring. There is no such thing as God and man. There is only God manifest and expressed as your individual being and mine. There is only God appearing on earth. The mystery of godliness we read the other day is God manifest in flesh. That's the mystery of godliness. God manifest in flesh. God appearing as individual beings. So there's no separation between God and its own selfhood individually formed, but we can set up a sense of separation, and that is what we are in this work of breaking down. Fine, let's stop a moment. You will eventually hear tape number 4 of this Kailua series. And you will notice that on the first side we have the entire subject of body, which of course includes the subject of the body of the universe, the physical, so-called physical universe. And you will see that the reason it is there is so that we do not have either an ignorance of truth or a blind faith, but that we really do understand that God has given us a body, and that that body is this body, and that we will never any more be separated from this body than the ring will be separated from gold. And the reason is that this body is the product of my consciousness. And this body is my consciousness made manifest, expressed. And the only way this body can improve is for my consciousness of truth to improve or be enlarged, until I come to the actual place where there is no more my consciousness and God's consciousness, but where God's consciousness has become solely and completely my consciousness. Then, of course, the body will show forth that which the Master's body showed forth after the ascension, or at the time of the ascension, pure spiritual being. Until the time that our consciousness is divested of all human theories and beliefs, our body will continue to show forth partly good and partly evil, partly spiritual and partly material. Now, as we are in the work of dying daily, that daily dying consists of the falling away of these human or material or mortal beliefs, and in proportion as they disappear, our consciousness is that much more the clear transparency of God consciousness, Christ consciousness. Therefore, our bodies, our business, our homes take on healthier, happier, more prosperous appearances. And so it is that this body goes with us wherever we go, and it improves in appearance in proportion as our spiritual discernment increases. This body will go with us even should we drop dead this instant. And if that should happen, the only thing that will be left in this chair is not my body, but the world's concept of my body which you are entertaining. My body will go with me. Your concept of my body will remain with you. And it acts in this wise. Supposing at this minute we were to receive a cable that our friend John Jones had died in Africa. Now, immediately, the first thing would come to us is, that's too bad. Or, well, why did that happen? Or some such thought would come into our mind. And then the next thought, of course, would be, and this wouldn't be a conscious one, but unconsciously we'd go through the whole thing of the burial or cremation. We'd remember at some time or other all that was happening to John Jones' body between the time that he died and the time we had the cable, or perhaps it would by that time be the funeral, and we would be mentally at the graveside. And then a week later, we get another cable that it was John Jones who died, but not our John Jones, another John Jones, because our John Jones is having a vacation on the lakes in Italy. Now what happened to that corpse that we visualized? Now what happened to that funeral or that cremation? What happened to that whole experience? It never was happening to our John Jones at all. Never. It was happening to us about our John Jones. It was a whole mental experience taking place within us about our John Jones, and our John Jones wasn't even there, and his body wasn't there. No part of him was there. It had nothing at all to do with him. So it is with us. At this moment, you sit here and you entertain a mental or a universal mental concept of me and of my body and its appearance. And should you be presented with an appearance of its death or my death, immediately would come up a thought of, oh, gee, oh, that's too bad. Oh, why did that have to happen? Oh, something or other, which would be an acknowledgement of something happening. And then, of course, would come the following days with whatever would take place. And someday it would surprise you to find out that the only place that took place was within your mental activity. That it wasn't happening to me at all, that I wasn't even there. Because I got up from the chair and went on about my business wherever I had been called to. Evidently, I had received a call to go somewhere and be about my Father's business, and I went. I'm not even aware of the fact any more than our John Jones was, that you're sitting around mourning him and picturing his body in the grave. He's enjoying himself on the lakes. So it would be that I would not have any awareness, would not necessarily have any awareness of what was going on in your mind. I'd be so busy on about my business. On the other hand, I have witnessed where those who were being buried were actually standing at the grave, knowing what we were seeing, and shaking their head and saying, no, it isn't happening to me. And they were standing there in the same body that we knew them in, with the same clothing on that we have been accustomed to seeing them in. So the day will come because of that you will know that consciousness and body are inseparable. Once you know that to the fullest degree, death will not even be a possibility to you from a human standpoint. Then there will only be a transition. Now, it becomes necessary to know that consciousness and body are one, just like gold and ring are one. Ring is the body, but gold is the substance. And so it is, consciousness is the substance, and body is its form, and they're inseparable and indivisible, and their substance is one. I and the Father are one. And as you know that, you will then know that the place whereon thou standest is holy ground. That wherever you go clad in the liberty of the Christ, never in danger. Now, on the other side of that tape number 4 of this Kailua series, you will find a very enlarged edition of the teaching of the nature of error. The nature of error as this mesmeric sense of separation from God as this mesmeric sense of a selfhood apart from God. And the reason that this tape will always be important to you and to all serious students of this message is that it will give you the correct letter of truth about two vital subjects which you will not find in the literature anywhere outside of the message of the infinite way. And yet it forms the very basis of our work. For yes, you'll find references like the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, or I and the Father are one. You will not find it brought out in this degree and with this application to life and body, to that which we call spirit and body, or spirit and the universe. Now, at this time, I ask you to remember that the importance of this is as a foundation to your understanding upon which you build spiritual discernment, and it is the spiritual discernment that does the actual work of healing and feeding and supplying and living. You see, out here is an appearance of evil. If we go at that appearance of evil with any sense of changing it, correcting it, healing it, improving it, battling it, we are back in the world. We are not in the infinite way. Once we have seen that those discords are not persons or places or things, but that they are these mesmeric images in thought, like that of our friend Brown in Africa, who wasn't there, then we approach this world from a spiritual standpoint, from a developed spiritual consciousness which says, I can disregard appearances. The battle is not mine, but God's. I do not have to contend with so-called forces of error, since now I see there aren't any. And that is itself demonstrated, achieved Christ consciousness. You have achieved Christ consciousness in proportion as you understand the nothingness of what is appearing out here as the discords of human existence. Now, it is in the attainment of that consciousness that the healing works take place, not only of your own affairs, but of the whole world that comes within range. If you were called upon to see a whole city full of error, and you understood that consciousness and body were one, inseparable and indivisible, and so no danger exists to either consciousness or body, and if you could see that all of the error that can ever be presented to your seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, and smelling is but the result of universal human belief and is not actually a physical being but a mental image and thought, you would have no fear of it. And in that no fear of it would be your degree of spiritual consciousness, and that would be the overcoming of it. Now, Christ consciousness is that state of consciousness which does not hate, fear, or love error. Christ consciousness is that state of consciousness which does not hate, fear, or love error. Go back and review the life of Jesus Christ and see if you can find anywhere in his mission or message any hate, any fear, or any love of evil. And then you will see that that which constituted him, the Christ, was his state of consciousness, which was without hate, fear, doubt, or love of error. So it is, in our individual experience, we attain Christ consciousness by degrees. We attain it and we achieve it in a measure. Not necessarily do we say that we have fully apprehended, but at least we do know that in the degree that we no longer hate error, fear it, battle it, or love it, in that degree we have attained a Christ consciousness, and that consciousness is the one that dispels sin, disease, death, lack, and limitation for those who bring themselves to our conscious thought, to our conscious activity. We can never bless anyone or any group. We can never bless this world while we are hating or fearing or loving the same evils that the world hates, fears, and loves. Our only degree of help is in proportion as we no longer hate, fear, nor love the things of this world, the hates and fears of this world, the battles of this world. Now, you do not prove your Christ consciousness by going out into the world to try to save it or reform it. As a matter of fact, you show your lack of spiritual consciousness by that means. You show your Christ consciousness in the degree that you can sit with the multitudes and let the multitudes come to you and draw of that light which you are. You prove the degree of your Christ consciousness when you can sit home and let the world impersonally come and draw from you your lack of hate, fear, and battles, and love of error. You show the degree of your Christhood in the degree that you can see through the sins, hates, and fears of the world and not let them touch you. You see, if Christ consciousness could save the world as a world, Jesus would have preached to all of the races and tribes around him, and more especially to the Romans, who were the devils in the lives of his Hebrew people. But he passed them by. He made no effort to save them, to preach to them, to teach them, to heal them. I have come only to those of my own household. And he didn't mean necessarily only the Jewish race. He meant those of his spiritual state, because there were many of those of the Jewish race that he would have nothing to do with, like the organized church after a while, and so forth and so on. Now, there is a tremendous power in the consciousness of any individual who so attains this inner union as to receive these impartations of scriptural promises. And by bringing ourselves to those who have attained some measure of that, we partake in a measure of their grace. If I be lifted up, shall draw all men unto that same level of consciousness. We benefit by each other's realized grace. Whatever degree of grace you and I attain, we share with each other and find it multiplied among ourselves. Where two or more are gathered together in the same consciousness, there is this power felt in even a greater degree. And that's why it is that so much must be kept out of our consciousness of the world's loves and hates, of the world's fears and doubts, in order that as we come together, this inflow of the Spirit can find itself multiplied on earth. Then not only are we individually and collectively a blessing to all around us, but to all those in far places who in some way or other have been led to reach and touch our consciousness. Never think for a moment that these people find our consciousness by any human means. They don't. They are spiritually directed from within, and they reach out all over the world, just as we reach out all over the world to those who have illumination. And we find ourselves one with God, but together. Let's stop a minute. You will understand now why much of this work of knowing the truth and affirming the truth and denying the error is ineffectual. It isn't because it isn't truth. It is because it is only a truth known in the mind without having come from this inner contact. Now, these affirmations or statements of truth, these declarations of truth made with the mind, have their place. And that place is merely to serve as reminders of the truth of being, in order that we may ultimately be led back to the actual contact itself. But where these affirmations and where these statements of truth are ineffectual is because they have stopped at the intellectual level and have not been continued until they brought us back to this contact whereby we actually receive the divine impartation from within. It is that divine impartation from within that is the Word of God that comes with power, quick, sharp, powerful, dividing asunder the very spirit and the soul. It is that Word of God within us that is spoken to us or uttered within us or felt within us or realized or achieved within us, that divine impulse recognized and realized. That is the power in the world, and that it is that goes out and does the work of blessing. The other part, the intellectual awareness of all this, those are but steps that must eventuate in an experience. And it is the experience that is the healer. It is not you or I as a person that is a healer. It is the experience of realization, the experience of contact, the experience of impartation. That is the healer. And without it, nobody's a healer, no matter how good they may be, no matter how virtuous they may be, no matter how kind and loving and generous and thoughtful they may be. That does not constitute a healer. The healer is Christ itself realized. Thank you.